In the bustling heart of Denver, an extraordinary story of fate is about to unfold. When Katherine Hayes, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, deliberately ditches her driver and security detail, she isn't just seeking solitude, she's searching for something her vast fortune can't buy: genuine connection. What she finds instead is a broken-down Tesla and a chance encounter that will change everything. Mike Sullivan isn't just another mechanic. He's a single father who's mastered the art of stretching every dollar, working miracles with engines by day and bedtime stories by night. When he stops to help a stranded motorist, he has no idea he's about to meet the wealthiest woman in Colorado, or that his simple act of kindness is about to spark a love story that will challenge everything both of them believe about what truly matters in life. This isn't just another romance. This is about how two people from vastly different worlds discover that the greatest fortune of all can't be measured in dollars and cents. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient alarm clock rattled against the nightstand at exactly 5:30 a.m., its metallic ring echoing through the small two-bedroom apartment. Mike Sullivan's hand reached out automatically to silence it, careful not to knock over the framed photo of Emma missing her front teeth. He'd learned long ago that every minute of sleep counted, but today wasn't about him. It was about making sure his daughter had everything she needed for her science presentation. In the soft glow of dawn, Mike pulled himself from bed, his muscles still aching from crawling under cars the day before. The worn leather toolbox sat by his bedroom door, his father's last gift before passing away 3 years ago. Some mornings, like this one, he'd catch himself staring at it, remembering his dad's words. "It's not about the tools, son. It's about the heart you put into fixing things." The kitchen calendar, Emma's masterpiece of crayon art and careful number writing, caught his eye as he started the coffee maker. Red circles marked bill due dates, while gold stars celebrated the days he could pick her up early from after-school care. Today had both, a testament to the constant balance he struggled to maintain. "Daddy?" Emma's sleepy voice carried from her bedroom. "Is it pancake day?" Mike smiled, despite the stack of bills waiting on the counter. "You bet it is, princess. Big day today, right?" Emma appeared in the doorway, her science project folder clutched to her chest, dark hair a wild mess around her face. At 8 years old, she already showed the same determination that had carried Mike through his toughest days after Sarah's death. "Do you think I'll remember everything?" she asked, sliding onto her usual kitchen stool. The careful way she set down her folder, smoothing its corners, reminded Mike so much of her mother it almost hurt. "You've got this," he assured her, measuring flour into a bowl. "Want to run through it one more time while we cook?" Together they made breakfast. Emma's voice growing more confident as she practiced explaining the water cycle to an audience of measuring cups and syrup bottles. Mike flipped pancakes and asked questions, watching his daughter's eyes light up with each correct answer. This was their ritual, their fortress against the world's complications. The bills could wait. The constant juggling of finances, the extra shifts he picked up when the rent went up again, the careful budgeting that meant sometimes having soup for dinner so Emma could go on her class field trips, all of it faded in moments like these. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. "Your pancake's burning." He quickly rescued the slightly charred breakfast, sliding it onto his own plate. "That's just how I like them, extra crispy." Emma giggled, not fooled for a second. "You always say that when you burn them, and I always mean it." He ruffled her hair, earning a mock protest. "Now go get dressed, scientist. We've got a big day ahead." While Emma got ready, Mike opened the bills, calculator in hand. The numbers never changed, no matter how many times he ran them. There was always more month than money. But he'd learned to make it work, to find creative solutions that kept their little world turning. The handmade calendar caught his eye again. Emma had drawn their family portrait at the top, Just the two of them, holding hands, standing in front of what was supposed to be their apartment building, but looked more like a castle. Sometimes he wondered if he was enough, if one parent could give her everything she needed. But then she'd smile at him like she was doing now, emerging from her room in her carefully chosen presentation outfit. And he knew they'd figure it out together. "Ready?" he asked, grabbing his keys and the toolbox. Emma nodded, clutching her project. "Ready." They stepped out into the morning light, father and daughter against the world, neither knowing that this ordinary day would be the less normal one they'd have for a very long time. Katherine Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse office, absently turning her father's old pocket watch over in her hands. 50 floors below, Denver's morning traffic crawled through the streets like lines of ants, each person rushing toward their own destiny. She wondered how many of them were genuinely happy. "Ms. Hayes," her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board members are assembled." She slipped the watch into her blazer pocket, its weight familiar and grounding. "Thank you. Claire, I'll be right there." The boardroom fell silent as Katherine entered, 12 pairs of eyes following her progress to the head of the table. Her heels clicked against marble flooring that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built an empire on connecting people through technology, yet she'd never felt more disconnected. "Gentlemen," she began, noting she was still the only woman in the room, "shall we discuss the Morrison acquisition?" 2 hours later, Katherine had secured unanimous approval for her latest strategic move. Hayes Technologies would be expanding its reach, adding another billion to its market value. Another victory that would make headlines, another reason for people to see the CEO instead of the woman. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, the startup founder she'd had dinner with last night. "Great meeting you. My team has put together an impressive pitch deck. Would love to discuss potential investment opportunities over dinner." Katherine deleted the message without responding. Just like all the others, Marcus had spent the evening dropping hints about funding, his eyes focused on her company's potential rather than her conversation. She was tired of being a walking investment opportunity. Back in her office, Katherine retrieved her father's pocket watch. The worn brass case had long since lost its shine, but the mechanisms inside kept perfect time. She clicked it open, reading. The inscription she knew by heart: "Time is the only true measure of wealth. Love, Dad." "Claire," she called through the intercom, "cancel my appointments for the afternoon, and ask Thomas to bring the car around." "Yes, Ms. Hayes, though there is the matter of the Peterson contract. It can wait until tomorrow." Katherine gathered her things, including the small photo she kept hidden in her desk drawer. Her father in overalls, teaching a young Katherine how to change a tire. Before Hayes Technologies, before the billions, before she became someone whose time was worth thousands of dollars per minute, they'd just been a family running a small electronics repair shop. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt suffocating. Her security detail would be waiting, as always. Thomas would drive her home in the armored Tesla, maintaining a respectable distance from any other vehicles. The same routine, the same isolation, the same golden cage. She fingered the watch in her pocket. Her father had built this company from nothing, but somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of what he'd truly wanted to create. Not an empire, but a legacy of helping people connect with each other. "Ms. Hayes?" Thomas stood by the car. Door already open, the usual route home. Katherine made a decision. "No, Thomas, take the afternoon off. I'll drive myself." "Ma'am, security protocol dictates." "I'm well aware of the protocols. I wrote them." She managed to smile. "Sometimes we need to break our own rules." Minutes later, she was behind the wheel of her personal Tesla, no security detail in sight. For the first time in years, she felt something close to freedom. She had no destination in mind, no meetings to attend, no deals to close. The pocket watch sat in her cup holder, ticking away the seconds. Time might be the only true measure of wealth, but lately all of hers had been spent accumulating the wrong kind of riches. She merged onto the highway, away from the gleaming towers of downtown. Maybe, just maybe, she could find something real out here, something that couldn't be measured in stock prices or market caps. She just didn't know she was driving straight toward it. Sullivan's auto repair didn't look like much from the outside. The sign needed repainting, and the small parking lot had more patches than pavement. But to Katherine, sitting in her Tesla across the street, it represented something real, something honest. She'd spent 3 days working up the courage to return, telling herself it was just to ensure the repair had held. Inside the garage's office, Emma sat at a small desk tucked into the corner, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on her math homework. The familiar sound of her dad's wrench turning beneath a car provided the perfect background music for multiplication tables. "Daddy," she called out, "what's 7 times 8? What's the trick I taught you?" Mike's voice echoed from under the Civic he was working on. Emma scrunched her nose. 7 times 8 equals 8 times 7. And 8 times 7. Oh, 56. She beamed, pencil scratching against paper. "I remember now." The bell above the door chimed, and Emma looked up to see a familiar face. It was the lady from the highway, the one Dad had helped last week. She was wearing fancy clothes again, but they somehow looked different here in the office's fluorescent lighting. "Hi," Emma said, straightening in her chair. "Are you here to see my dad?" Katherine smiled, caught off guard by the child's direct gaze. "Yes, I am. Is he available?" "Dad!" Emma called out. "The Tesla lady is back." There was a clang, followed by a muffled curse that Emma pretended not to hear. Mike rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes met Katherine's, and for a moment neither spoke. I'm sorry, I don't think I caught your name last time," Mike said, suddenly aware of the grease stains on his coveralls. "Kate," she replied, choosing her mother's nickname for her. "I wanted to thank you properly for your help last week. And maybe have you checked if everything's still running smoothly?" Mike glanced at the Tesla through the window. Even from here, he could tell it was worth more than he made in a year. "The bypass should be holding fine, but I'm happy to take a look." "What's 7 times 9? Emma interrupted, her homework apparently more pressing than adult conversation. Mike turned to answer, but Katherine beat him to it. 63. You can check it by counting up from 7 times 8, which is 56. Just add one more 7. Emma's eyes widened. "That's the same way Dad teaches me." Mike studied Katherine with new interest. Most of his customers ignored Emma completely, treating her presence in the garage like an inconvenience. But Katherine, Kate, moved to Emma's desk, genuine curiosity in her expression. "Math was always my favorite subject," she told Emma. "Want to know a cool trick for the 9 times table?" For the next 15 minutes, Mike watched as the CEO of Hayes Technologies, though he didn't know that yet, sat with his daughter, showing her how to use her fingers to solve multiplication problems. Emma was delighted, especially when Kate demonstrated how 9 times 4 could be solved by holding down her 4th finger. "Dad, look!" Emma demonstrated proudly. 3 up, 1 down, 5 up, 36. "Very impressive," Mike said, meaning it. "But maybe we should let Miss Kate get back to her day. I'm sure she's busy." Katherine glanced at her watch, her father's watch, and made a decision. "Actually, I have some time. Would you mind checking the car? I thought I heard a slight noise this morning." Mike knew there was nothing wrong with the Tesla. The bypass he'd installed was perfect, and they both knew it. But something in her eyes, something that looked almost like hope, made him nod. "Sure, I can take a look." "Emma, why don't you show Ms. Kate your science project while I check things out? The one that earned you an A+ last week." Emma practically bounced out of her chair. "It's about the water cycle. Want to see how I made the clouds rain?" As Mike popped the Tesla's hood, he could hear his daughter's enthusiastic explanation and Katherine's engaged responses. The sound of their laughter mixed with the familiar garage noises, tools clinking, the old radio playing quietly, the hum of the overhead fans. Somehow, it all fit together perfectly. He found himself taking longer than necessary to check the engine, making sure to inspect parts that couldn't possibly be causing problems. Every few minutes, he'd catch fragments of conversation from the office. And then the water evaporates. That means it turns into vapor. That's fascinating. Tell me more about precipitation. Dad says that's just a fancy word for rain. When he finally closed the hood, he'd stretched a 5-minute check into nearly 30. Katherine was sitting cross-legged on the floor, with Emma, their heads bent over the science project display board. Everything looks perfect, he said, then added with a smile, just like it did last week. Katherine stood, smoothing her skirt. Better safe than sorry. What do I owe you? For looking at a perfectly functioning car? Mike shook his head. Nothing. Consider it a follow-up to last week's repair. At least let me pay you for the math tutoring, she said, her eyes twinkling. That'll be one cloud demonstration, Emma chimed in. Right, Dad? Mike laughed. Sounds fair to me. As Katherine walked to her car, she paused at the door. I drive past here most days, she said casually, in case any other strange noises develop. After she left, Emma returned to her homework, but not before saying, I like her, Dad. She's not like your other customers. Mike watched the Tesla disappear around the corner. No, he agreed quietly. She's definitely not. Over the next few weeks, Katherine's Tesla developed an impressive array of imaginary problems. A slight rattle when turning left, a mysterious clicking sound at exactly 40 métopes, a funny smell that only seemed to occur on Tuesday afternoons. Coincidentally, when Emma had the least homework. Each time Mike would hide his knowing smile and play along, methodically checking systems that they both knew were running perfectly. And each time, Katherine would find herself staying longer, drawn into their world like a moth to warm lamplight. Today's invented issue was a concerning whir in the engine. Katherine sat in the office, a folded newspaper tucked carefully in her purse. Its business section featured her photo and the headline, Hayes Technologies CEO announces revolutionary AI partnership. She'd been hiding similar articles for weeks now, each one feeling heavier than the last. Look what I got on my spelling test. Emma bounded into the office, proudly displaying a paper marked with a bright red A+. I even spelled necessary right. That's wonderful, Katherine exclaimed, genuinely delighted. How did you remember the spelling? 1 collar, 2 sleeves, Emma recited. Dad taught me that trick. Never fails. From under the Tesla, Mike's voice carried. And what's the trick for arithmetic? Emma groaned dramatically. A rat in the house may eat the ice cream. But Dad, we're not doing spelling anymore. We're celebrating. Katherine watched their easy banter with a mixture of joy and growing unease. Every visit made it harder to maintain the facade of just being Kate, the random customer who kept finding excuses to return. The newspaper in her purse felt like it was burning a hole through the expensive leather. She'd almost been discovered yesterday when a business call came in during one of her visits. She'd had to rush outside, speaking in hushed tones about market projections and quarterly earnings. When she returned, Mike had given her an odd look, but he hadn't asked questions. That was part of what drew her to him, his quiet acceptance, his lack of prying. Dad says you know lots about computers, Emma said, pulling Katherine from her thoughts. Could you help me with my technology project? We're supposed to interview someone who works with them. Katherine felt her throat tighten. I do work with computers, yes. What kind of work do you do? Mike asked, emerging from under the car while wiping his hands. There was a genuine curiosity in his voice that made the truth stick in her throat. I'm in tech development. She managed, the massive understatement making her wince internally. But I'd love to help with your project, Emma. Mike watched their interaction. Noting how Katherine's shoulders had tensed at the question, there was something about her that didn't quite add up. The designer clothes, the top-of-the-line Tesla, the way she sometimes spoke on the phone in what he'd come to think of as her business voice. But then she'd sit on the floor with Emma, completely engrossed in kid-level conversations, or laugh at his terrible car puns, and none of the rest seemed to matter. "All clear under there," he announced. "No sign of any whirring. Better safe." "Then sorry," Katherine replied, their now familiar exchange feeling both comfortable and increasingly fraudulent. "What do I owe you?" "How about you join us for ice cream?" Emma suggested. "Dad said we could go to Springer's after work, and they have the best rocky road in Denver." Mike started to protest. He hadn't meant to put Katherine on the spot, but she was already smiling. "I'd love to," she said, then checked her watch. Her father's watch, though they didn't know its significance. "I have a meeting, but I could meet you there around 6. As she gathered her things, the newspaper slipped slightly from her purse. She caught it quickly, but not before Mike glimpsed what looked like a business photo on the front page. Something tugged at his memory. He'd seen that face somewhere before, hadn't he? But then Emma was talking about ice cream flavors, and Katherine was laughing at her enthusiasm, and the moment slipped away. The truth would keep for another day, Katherine told herself. Just a little longer in this perfect bubble where she was just Kate, where worth was measured in spelling test scores and ice cream preferences, not stock prices and market caps. She didn't see the article that had fallen from her purse, now lying partially hidden under Emma's desk. The one with her full-page photo and the story of her rise to becoming one of the youngest female CEOs in tech history. It would stay there, waiting, until gravity finally pulled her two worlds into inevitable collision. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect weather for the Denver Youth Soccer League's championship game. Mike sat in the bleachers, a thermos of coffee warming his hands against the autumn chill. Emma was on the field for warm-ups, her purple jersey a bright spot among her teammates. "Is this seat taken?" He looked up to find Katherine standing there, casual in jeans and a lightweight sweater, the most dressed down he'd ever seen her. For a moment he just stared. Without her usual business attire, she looked younger, more relaxed. "I didn't know you were coming," he managed finally. "Emma invited me on Thursday, during our ice cream strategy session." She smiled, settling beside him. She was very insistent that I see her new soccer moves. The memory of their ice cream outing brought an involuntary smile to Mike's face. What had been meant as a quick treat had turned into a 2-hour conversation, with Emma holding court about everything from soccer techniques to her theories about why the sky was blue. "Dad!" Emma came running over, cleats kicking up grass. "You came!" she exclaimed to Katherine, beaming. "I'm number 7, see?" She turned to show off her jersey. "Lucky number 7," Katherine replied. "I used to play soccer too, you know." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Were you good?" "I was terrible," Katherine laughed, "but I loved it anyway. Still remember some of the drills, though. Want to help me warm up?" Before either adult could respond, Emma had grabbed Katherine's hand and was pulling her toward the practice area. Mike watched in amazement as Katherine kicked off her shoes, not seeming to care that her probably expensive jeans were getting grass stains as she helped Emma practice passing. "Sullivan!" called out Coach Martinez. "We need a team mom for today. Johnson's mom has the flu. Any chance?" Mike started to explain he'd have to do it himself, as usual, when Katherine jogged back over. "I'll do it," she offered. "If that's okay." 20 minutes later, Katherine Hayes, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, was wearing a neon orange Team Mom vest, distributing orange slices and coordinating the water bottle rotation with military precision. Mike couldn't stop stealing glances at her, especially when she cheered for Emma's team with the same enthusiasm she'd shown in the garage over solved math problems. "Your girlfriend's really nice," Mrs. Rodriguez said, settling next to Mike, with her ever-present camera. "So good with the kids." "Oh, she's not, we're not." Mike stumbled over the words, realizing he wasn't sure exactly what Katherine was to them. A customer, a friend, something more. Mrs. Rodriguez just smiled knowingly and snapped another photo of the team. Katherine now teaching them a pre-game cheer she claimed to remember from her own soccer days. The game itself was intense, tied 1-1 going into the final minutes. Emma played her heart out at midfield, her face set in concentration. When she managed to steal the ball and pass it to her teammate for the winning goal, the crowd erupted. Katherine jumped up cheering, her carefully maintained composure forgotten in the excitement. She hugged Mike without thinking, both of them caught up in the moment. When they realized what they were doing, they pulled apart awkwardly, but something had shifted in the air between them. During the post-game celebration, Mrs. Rodriguez insisted on taking team photos. Katherine tried to step aside, but Emma wouldn't hear of it. "You're part of the team now," she insisted, pulling Katherine into the frame. Later, as they walked to their cars, Emma proudly wearing her championship medal, Katherine felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Her phone had buzzed several times, probably her assistant with some crisis or another, but for once she didn't check it. "We usually get victory pizza at Mario's," Mike said hesitantly. "Would you like to join us?" Katherine knew she had a board report to review, emails to answer, a video call with investors in an hour. She looked at Emma's hopeful face, at Mike's tentative smile, at the simple happiness of this moment. "I'd love to," she said, and meant it more than any business deal she'd ever closed. As they walked toward Mario's, Emma skipping ahead, Mike found himself studying Katherine's profile in the late afternoon light. She was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Brilliant and accomplished, he'd gathered that much, yet somehow more alive here in their simple world of soccer games and pizza joints than in whatever high-powered life she led outside it. Neither of them noticed Mrs. Rodriguez's camera capturing one final shot. The three of them walking together, Emma in the middle, all laughing at something now forgotten. It would become one of Mike's favorite photos, even after everything that happened. Next, the kitchen in Mike's apartment wasn't much, just enough counter space to work, a stove that needed sweet-talking on cold mornings, and a window that looked out over the city's cheaper side. But on this evening, it felt like the heart of the world. "You've really never made pasta from scratch?" Mike asked, watching Katherine stare dubiously at the flour mound he'd created on the counter. "I have people who—" She caught herself. "I mean, I usually order in, or microwave things." Emma, perched on her usual stool, giggled. "Dad says the microwave is for emergencies and college students." "Well then," Katherine said, rolling up her sleeves, "I guess it's time I learned." Mike guided her hands as she formed a well in the flour. Like this, gentle but firm. His fingers brushed against hers, and neither pulled away immediately. The touch lingered warm and electric until Emma's voice broke the moment. "Can I crack the eggs?" Soon the kitchen was a harmonious chaos of flour-dusted surfaces and concentrated faces. Katherine, who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found herself completely focused on the simple task of kneading dough. Her perfect manicure was ruined. There was flour in her hair, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this content. "Now we let it rest," Mike explained, covering the dough with a bowl. Perfect timing to help Emma with her science project. The living room coffee table had become their unofficial homework station over the past few weeks. Today, it was covered with papers, colored markers, and Emma's ambitious attempt to model sustainable energy sources. "So, if we put the solar panel here," Emma explained, pointing to her diagram, "and the wind turbine here." Katherine caught herself about to launch into an explanation of Hayes Technologies' latest green energy initiatives. Instead, she helped Emma calculate the basic energy outputs using grade school math, marveling at how the simple explanations made her see her own company's work in a new light. "Dad, can we have hot chocolate?" Emma asked as they finished the project. "With the little marshmallows?" Mike glanced at the clock. It was getting late, later than Katherine usually stayed. But before he could remind Emma about bedtime, Katherine was already heading to the kitchen. "I may not know how to make pasta," she called over her shoulder, "but I do know how to heat milk for hot chocolate." Mike followed her, leaning against the doorframe as she moved around his kitchen with growing familiarity. She'd learned where the mugs were kept, which burner heated most evenly, how Emma liked exactly 7 mini marshmallows in her cup. "You're good at this," he said softly, "at making hot chocolate, at being here with us." Katherine's hand trembled slightly as she stirred the milk. Here in this kitchen, with its cheap laminate counters and warm memories, she felt more herself than in her penthouse with its professional chef and marble surfaces. "I like being here," she admitted, not meeting his eyes. The newspaper headlines felt a million miles away. Here, she wasn't Katherine Hayes, CEO. She was just Kate, who couldn't cook but made decent hot chocolate, who helped with homework and cheered at soccer games. They carried the mugs to the living room where Emma had dozed off on the couch, surrounded by her project materials. Mike carefully moved the papers while Katherine draped the throw blanket over her. "I should go," Katherine whispered, but made no move toward the door. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping hot chocolate, watching Emma sleep. The moment felt fragile, precious, beautiful in its ordinary perfection. "Stay for dinner tomorrow?" Mike asked suddenly. "We're trying out the pasta, if it works. If it doesn't, we can always order pizza." Katherine smiled. Then, more seriously, "I'd love to." As she finally gathered her things to leave, her hand brushed against the recipe card where she'd attempted to note down the pasta instructions. Her elegant handwriting looked out of place next to Mike's practical scrawl, but somehow the combination worked. Like so many things about their growing relationship, it shouldn't have made sense, but it did. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked at the door. "We'll be here," Mike replied softly. "We're always here." Driving home in her Tesla, Katherine found herself actually humming, some pop song Emma had been playing earlier. Her phone showed 15 missed calls, 37 urgent emails, and a reminder about tomorrow's shareholders meeting. For the first time in her career, she didn't immediately pull over to handle the crisis of the day. Instead, she thought about flour-covered counters, 7 mini marshmallows, and the way Mike's hand felt, guiding hers through the art of pasta making. The two worlds were colliding more with each passing day, but here in this moment she couldn't bring herself to care. Emma's science project had been gathering dust under her desk at the garage for days. Mike had meant to bring it home, but between rush repairs and keeping the books balanced, it had slipped his mind. Now, kneeling to retrieve it, his hand brushed against something else. A glossy page torn from a magazine or newspaper. He almost didn't look at it, almost added it to the pile of recyclables without a second thought. But there was something familiar about the photo that caught his eye, made his heart skip a beat. Katherine stared back at him from the page, but not the Katherine he knew. This was Katherine Hayes, CEO of Hayes Technologies, named one of the most influential women in tech. The article was dated just 2 weeks ago, discussing the company's groundbreaking AI developments and its CEO's visionary leadership. Mike sat heavily in Emma's desk chair, the article trembling slightly in his hands. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The expensive clothes, the top-of-the-line Tesla, the business call she'd rush outside to take. The way she'd carefully avoided specifics about her work, deflecting Emma's innocent questions about what she did with computers. His mind raced back through their interactions, recoloring every memory with this new knowledge. When she'd helped Emma with her math homework, she hadn't just been good with numbers. She was a certified genius who'd revolutionized tech industry algorithms. The watch she always wore wasn't just a family heirloom. It had belonged to James Hayes, the founder of a multi-billion-dollar empire. The bell above the door chimed. Mike looked up to see Katherine, no, Miss Hayes, walking in, carrying a bag that smelled like the fancy coffee shop down the street. "I brought your favorite," she said, then stopped short at his expression. Her eyes dropped to the article in his hands, and all the color drained from her face. "Katherine Hayes," he said quietly, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. "CEO of Hayes Technologies. Current net worth," he glanced at the article, $11 billion. "Mike, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'm having trouble understanding. Why the head of a tech empire has been pretending to need car repairs every week. Why she's been—" He trailed off, the weight of their situation hitting him fully. "Was any of it real?" "All of it," Katherine said quickly, taking a step forward. "Everything except my title. The way I feel about being here with you and Emma." That's more real than any board meeting I've ever sat through. You let Emma get attached, Mike said, and this was what really hurt. You let her believe you were just Kate, the nice lady who helps with homework and comes to soccer games. Do you have any idea what finding out the truth will do to her? Katherine flinched. I never meant to hurt her, either of you. At first, I just wanted to hold on to the feeling of being normal, being liked for who I am, rather than what I own. And then, by the time I realized how deep I was in, you should have told us. When? Katherine's voice cracked. When you were teaching me to make pasta? When Emma was showing me her science project? Every perfect moment we had, I told myself, tomorrow, I'll tell them tomorrow. But tomorrow meant losing this. Losing you both. Mike stood up, needing to move, to think. The article crinkled in his grip. I fix cars for a living, Katherine. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and clip coupons for groceries. My daughter wears second-hand soccer cleats, and sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I'm doing enough for her. What could someone like you possibly want with people like us? Everything, Katherine whispered. Mike, look at me, please. He did, against his better judgment. She looked exactly the same as she had yesterday, same kind eyes, same gentle smile. But now he saw the invisible weight of empire on her shoulders, the gilded cage she'd been trying to escape. I have to pick Emma up from school, he said finally. I think you should go. Mike, please, I need time to think, to figure out how to tell Emma. Katherine reached for her purse, then paused. Slowly, she pulled out her father's pocket watch and placed it on the desk. My father built Hayes Technologies from nothing. He started as a repairman, just like you. He gave me this watch to remind me that time spent doing what you love, with people you love, is the only wealth that matters. She took a shaky breath. I've never lied about who I am, Mike, just about what I do. But Mike had turned away, unable to watch her leave. The bell chimed again, and he was alone with the article that had shattered their careful illusion. Through the window, he watched her Tesla pull away. The coffee she'd brought sat untouched on the desk, growing cold next to the watch that told so much more than time. The drive to Emma's school felt longer than usual. Mike rehearsed different versions of the truth in his head, each one sounding more impossible than the last. How do you tell your 8-year-old that her new friend, the person she'd grown to trust and admire, had been hiding such a massive secret? Emma bounced into the car with her usual energy. Is Kate coming over today? We're supposed to finish our project on renewable energy. Mike gripped the steering wheel tighter. Actually, sweetheart, we need to talk about Kate. But before he could continue, Emma was already pulling something from her backpack. Look what I found online. I was using the computer lab for research, and she held up a printout of a web page, and Mike's heart sank. There was Katherine, in a professional headshot, under the headline, Hayes Technologies CEO announces revolutionary educational software initiative. Dad, Emma said slowly, her voice small. Why didn't Kate tell us she was famous? Mike pulled the car over, knowing this conversation couldn't wait until they got home. He turned to face his daughter, surprised to find her looking more confused than upset. I think she was afraid, he said carefully, watching Emma's reaction. Afraid things would be different if we knew. Because she's rich? Emma asked. Like, really rich? That's part of it. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. You know what's funny, Dad? In the article she looks kind of sad. Not like when she's helping me with math or making hot chocolate with us. Mike felt something catch in his throat. Leave it to his daughter to see straight to the heart of things. She does look happier with us, doesn't she? Are you mad at her? Emma's perception was uncanny sometimes. I'm disappointed she didn't. Tell us the truth. But Dad, Emma said with the simple logic of childhood, she did tell us the truth. She told us she likes computers and math. She told us about playing soccer when she was little. She told us her dad taught her about fixing things. Emma paused. She just didn't tell us she was on the internet. Mike couldn't help but smile at this characterization of Katherine's omission. It's a little more complicated than that, sweetie. Is it? Emma challenged. You always tell me that what matters is who people are inside, not what they look like or what they have. The words, his own words, hit home. He thought about Katherine kneeling on his kitchen floor, covered in flour. Katherine in that ridiculous orange Team Mom vest, cheering her heart out. Katherine's face when she'd said everything. Her answer to what she wanted with them. His phone buzzed. A text from Katherine. I left something at the garage for Emma, the project research she asked for. I understand if you don't want me to come by anymore, but please make sure she gets it. And Mike, I'm sorry, not for who I am, but for not trusting you both with the whole truth sooner. Can we go to the garage? Emma asked, as if reading his thoughts. I left my science project there, and maybe, she hesitated, maybe Kate will. Come by. Mike started the car again. She might not, Emma. Things are complicated right now. Because grown-ups make them complicated, Emma muttered, sounding so much like her mother that Mike had to laugh. At the garage, they found more than just Emma's science project. On the desk sat a thick folder of research materials on renewable energy, perfectly tailored for third-grade level understanding. Next to it was Katherine's father's pocket watch and a note, Emma, time is the only true measure of wealth. The hours I've spent with you and your dad have been the richest of my life. I hope someday you'll understand why I was afraid to tell you everything. You're the smartest girl I know, so I think you already do. Mike, my father kept this watch to remind him of where he came from. I kept it to remind me of what matters. Right now, it belongs here, with the people who helped me remember what that really means. Emma picked up the watch carefully. Can we call her, Dad? Please? Mike looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at the watch that had traveled from a humble repair shop to the heights of corporate success, only to find its way back to another small garage. Maybe there was a message in that journey. His finger hovered over Katherine's number in his phone. Emma pressed against his side, her small hand still cradling the watch that had meant so much to 3 generations of the Hayes family. Okay, he said finally, but first, we need to talk about what happens next, all of us. Katherine's penthouse felt colder than usual. She stood at her familiar spot by the window, but instead of watching the city traffic below, she found herself staring at her reflection. The impeccably dressed CEO looked back at her, not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in her designer suit, perfect, polished, and completely alone. The pocket watch's absence felt like a physical ache. For the first time in her adult life, she'd gone a week without its reassuring weight in her pocket, a week without Emma's laughter, without Mike's quiet strength. Ms. Hayes, Claire's voice interrupted her thoughts. The board is requesting an update on the Morgan merger. Tell them it's proceeding as planned. Katherine turned from the window, sliding back into her role with practiced ease. But her eyes caught on a small detail she'd never noticed before. A child's drawing tucked into the corner of her desk calendar. Emma had sketched it during one of their homework sessions. 3 stick figures, 1 small and 2 tall, standing in front of what looked like a garage. Across town, Mike was closing up shop early. Thursday afternoons used to be when Katherine would bring coffee and help Emma with her homework while he finished up with his last customers. Now the empty office felt too quiet, despite the familiar sounds of tools and engines from the garage. Emma's drawings still covered the bulletin board, but her usual after-school enthusiasm had dimmed. She sat at her desk, half-heartedly working on math problems that she would have eagerly tackled with Katherine's help just a week ago. "Dad?" she asked, not looking up from her worksheet. "Do rich people not get to have friends?" Mike set down his wrench. "What makes you ask that?" "I was thinking about Kate, about why she didn't tell us. Maybe when you're rich, everybody just wants your money, not you." Emma chewed her pencil thoughtfully. "That must be really lonely." Mike thought about Katherine's face when she'd knelt on his kitchen floor, covered in flour and laughing. How alive she'd looked, how real. "I think you might be right, sweetheart. Then we should help her not be lonely anymore. If only it were that simple. Mike pulled out his phone, looking at Catherine's last text message for what felt like the 100th time. Her words about trust and truth blurred together, but one line stood out. "I never pretended to be someone else. I just finally got to be myself." At Hayes Technologies, Katherine sat through another interminable meeting about market projections and growth strategies. Her tablet displayed complex financial charts, but her mind kept wandering to simpler equations. Emma's multiplication, tables, the way Mike could calculate repair costs in his head, the perfect ratio of mini marshmallows to hot chocolate. "And what are your thoughts, Ms. Hayes?" a board member asked. Katherine blinked, realizing she'd completely lost track of the conversation. For the first time in her career, she found herself saying, "I need a moment to consider this further. Let's reconvene tomorrow." The board members exchanged surprised glances. Katherine Hayes was known for her quick, decisive leadership. She never postponed decisions. In her office afterward, Katherine found herself holding her phone, Emma's contact information glowing on the screen. The last message she'd sent sat unanswered. A link to an article about a junior science fair, the kind of thing she used to share with Emma all the time. She missed them. Not just the big moments, soccer games and cooking lessons, but the small ones. The way Emma hummed while doing homework. The slight crease between Mike's eyebrows when he concentrated on a particularly tricky repair. The feeling of belonging somewhere she didn't have to be. Katherine Hayes, CEO. Mike stood in his kitchen that evening, staring at the pasta maker they'd used together. Emma's voice carried from her room, where she was supposedly getting ready for bed. "Dad, I can't find my science folder." He walked to her room, finding her surrounded by scattered papers. "Isn't it in your backpack?" "No. I need the special one. The one with Kate's research about solar panels." Emma's lip trembled slightly. "I was going to read it before bed." Mike sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her close. "You miss her, don't you?" Emma nodded against his chest. "She makes the best hot chocolate. And she always explains things in a way that makes sense, and—" She hesitated. "She makes you smile, Dad, like Mom used to." The truth of it hit him like a physical force. Katherine hadn't just entered their lives. She'd helped heal something. Neither of them had realized was still broken. On his dresser, Katherine's pocket watch kept time, marking the seconds between what was and what could be, if they were brave enough to try again. Katherine sat in her Tesla outside Sullivan's auto repair, a worn photo album in her lap. Through the garage's open door, she could see Mike working, his familiar movements both comforting and nerve-wracking. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times over the past 2 weeks, but now that she was here, words failed her. The decision was made for her when Emma glanced up from her homework and spotted the car. "Kate!" she exclaimed, jumping up from her desk and running outside before Mike could stop her. Katherine stepped out of the car, and Emma crashed into her with a hug that nearly knocked her over. Over the child's head, she met Mike's eyes. He stood in the garage doorway, expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "I brought something to show you both," Katherine said softly. "If you have time." Mike checked his watch, her father's watch, which he'd taken to wearing. The gesture wasn't lost on her. Shops closing in 10 minutes anyway. They gathered around Emma's homework desk, the photo album between them. Katherine's hands trembled slightly as she opened it to the first page. This is where Hayes Technologies started. The photo showed a small repair shop, not unlike Mike's garage. A man in oil-stained coveralls stood proudly in front, a young Katherine perched on his shoulders. "That's my dad, James Hayes, when he was just a repairman who liked tinkering with computers." She turned the page. "This was our first computer, the one he built from spare parts. We lived in the apartment above the shop." Emma leaned in closer. "You lived above a garage like Jimmy from my class." "Just like that," Katherine smiled. "We didn't have much money, but Dad always said we were rich in what mattered." She glanced at Mike. "That's why the watch means so much. He wore it every day while building computers, keeping track of how long repairs took." Mike's expression softened slightly as she continued through the album. Photos showed Katherine growing up in the shop, learning to build computers alongside. Her father, the business slowly growing from one room to two, then to a small warehouse. The last photo he took at the original shop, Katherine said, pointing to a faded image. She was a teenager, holding up a computer circuit board, her father's arm around her shoulders. A month later, our first major contract came through. Everything changed so fast after that. She turned another page, and the humble repair shop gave way to corporate offices and magazine covers. Sometimes I feel like I'm still that girl in the repair shop, trying to make her dad proud, trying to help people the way he did, just on a bigger scale. She closed the album carefully, but somewhere along the way, I lost the part of me that knew how to connect with people, not just machines. Until you got a flat tire, Mike said quietly. Until I met a mechanic who reminded me what it feels like to fix things with your hands and your heart. Katherine met his eyes. I should have told you everything sooner, but being here, being just Kate, it let me remember who I was before. The titles and the billion-dollar valuations. Emma, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "Do you still know how to fix computers?" "I do," Katherine smiled. "Though these days I mostly tell other people how to fix them. Could you teach me?" "Dad's good with cars, but he says computers are different." Mike cleared his throat. "Emma, Ms. Hayes is very busy." "Kate," Katherine interrupted. "Please. At least here, and I'm never too busy for someone who wants to learn." She hesitated, then added, "That's what my dad always said." She pulled one last photo from the album, one Mike and Emma hadn't seen yet. It showed James Hayes on his last day at work, standing in his modern office, but wearing his old repair shop coveralls, that same pocket watch visible in his pocket. "He never forgot where he came from," Katherine said softly. "I did, for a while. But being here with you both, it helped me remember." Mike touched the watch on his wrist, feeling its steady rhythm. "Emma has a computer club presentation next week about women in technology." He paused meaningfully. "Maybe you'd like to help her prepare?" Katherine felt tears threatening but held them back. "I'd like that if you're both sure." "I'm sure," Emma declared, then looked at her father questioningly. Mike studied Katherine for a long moment. "The truth this time?" "All of it?" "All of it," Katherine promised. "No more hiding." Emma hugged Katherine again, then grabbed the photo album. "Can we look at more pictures? I want to see all the computers you built." As Emma flipped through the pages, exclaiming over each photo, Mike and Katherine shared a look of cautious hope. The distance between repair shop owner and CEO seemed a little smaller, bridged by shared memories and second chances. The pocket watch kept time, marking the moment when past and present aligned, pointing toward a future that none of them could have predicted, but all of them wanted to explore. The first photo appeared on a local gossip blog, Katherine Hayes, tech billionaire, at a neighborhood pizza place with an unidentified man and child. By evening, more serious business publications had picked up the story. By morning, it was everywhere. Mike discovered it when his first customer of the day held up his phone instead of car keys. "This you, Sullivan?" The image was grainy but clear enough. The three of them leaving Mario's after Emma's latest soccer victory. Katherine's face was instantly recognizable to anyone who followed business news. The headlines ranged from curious to sensational. Tech CEO's secret life. Hayes Technologies leader found in local romance. Billionaire Katherine Hayes, love in the fast lane. Mike's phone buzzed with Katherine's text. "I'm so sorry. My PR team is handling it. Are you and Emma okay?" Before he could respond, the garage's phone started ringing. Then his cell phone. Then reporters appeared at the door, cameras ready. "Dad?" Emma's voice wavered as she peeked out from the office. "There are people taking pictures." Mike pulled the garage doors closed with a decisive clang, shutting out the growing crowd of journalists. His hands shook slightly as he dialed Katherine's number. "I'm on my way," she said immediately. "Don't talk to anyone. I'm bringing help." 20 minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the back entrance. Katherine emerged with a sharp-suited woman who introduced herself as Sarah Chen, head of PR for Hayes Technologies. "First," Katherine said, hugging Emma, who had rushed. To her, "Are you both all right?" "Just confused," Emma admitted. "Why do people care where we eat pizza?" The adults exchanged glances over her head. Sarah cleared her throat. "Ms. Hayes is a public figure. People are naturally curious about her life." "Then they should ask her about computers," Emma declared. "That's way more interesting than pizza." Despite the situation, they all smiled. Katherine squeezed Emma's hand. "You're absolutely right. Sarah, can you give us a moment?" Once the PR head stepped outside, Katherine turned to Mike. "I should have prepared you for this possibility. I'm used to the attention, but I never wanted to drag you and Emma into it." "How bad will it get?" Mike asked, thinking of Emma's school, his business, their quiet life. "It depends," Katherine said honestly. "If we hide, they'll dig deeper. If we're open but boring, they'll eventually lose interest." She hesitated. "Or, if you want to step back, I would understand." "No!" Emma protested. "We just got you back." Mike looked at his daughter, then at Katherine, the woman who had brought such unexpected joy to their lives, who had helped Emma with homework and taught him to see beyond appearances. "Emma's right. We didn't come this far to give up now." Katherine's relief was visible. "Then we face it together. Sarah has a plan." The plan, as it turned out, was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of hiding, they would simply be themselves. Sarah arranged a single brief interview with a respected business journal. The story focused on Katherine's commitment to education and mentorship, featuring Emma's computer club presentation, where Katherine had spoken about women in technology. The photos showed Katherine helping Emma with her project, dressed casually and looking more relaxed than she ever had in corporate shots. One candid image captured Mike teaching Katherine basic engine maintenance, both laughing as she got grease. On her designer blouse, the article's headline read, "Beyond the Boardroom, How Katherine Hayes is Investing in Future Generations." But there were still adjustments to be made. Paparazzi lurked outside the garage. Emma's teachers had to be briefed about privacy concerns. Mike found himself learning to dodge personal questions from suddenly curious customers. "I'm sorry," Katherine said one evening, after they'd had to cancel a planned dinner out due to photographers. They sat instead in Mike's kitchen, Emma teaching them both how to make origami frogs. "For what?" Mike asked, fumbling with his paper. "Being successful, being you. For complicating your lives." Emma looked up from her perfect frog. "Dad says nothing worth having comes easy." Katherine smiled. "Your dad is very wise, and terrible at origami," Emma added, eyeing his crumpled attempt. Their laughter drew curious stares from the photographer waiting outside, but they didn't care. Let the world wonder about the CEO, the mechanic, and the little girl. Their truth was too simple for headlines. Three people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Later, after Emma went to bed, Mike and Katherine stood at the kitchen window. A camera flash occasionally brightened the street below. "They'll get bored eventually," Katherine assured him. Mike took her hand. "I won't," in the quiet of the kitchen. With the evidence of their simple dinner still on the counter and Emma's origami frogs lined up on the windowsill, they found themselves exactly where they wanted to be. In the spotlight, but somehow still wonderfully, perfectly themselves. Mike adjusted his bow tie for the 100th time, catching his reflection in the mirror of the hotel's elevator. The tuxedo Katherine had sent over fit perfectly, but he still felt like a kid playing dress-up. His work-roughened hands seemed out of place against the fine fabric. "Stop fidgeting," Emma commanded from beside him, absolutely princess-like in her new purple dress. "You look handsome." The annual Denver Children's Hospital Gala was Katherine's first major public appearance with them. She'd been clear that they didn't have to come, but Emma had been excited about the prospect of a fancy party, and Mike knew this was part of Katherine's world. They needed to understand. The elevator opened directly into the ballroom, and Mike's breath caught. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over hundreds of Denver's wealthiest and most influential citizens. Women dripped diamonds. Men wore watches worth more than his annual income. "Mike! Emma!" Catherine's voice cut through his rising anxiety. She appeared in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than his garage, but her smile was the same one she wore while making pasta in his kitchen. Emma hugged her carefully, mindful of both their dresses. "You look like a princess." "So, do you?" Katherine smiled, then turned to Mike. Her eyes softened. "And you look uncomfortable," he finished with a self-deprecating laugh. "I was going to say perfect." She straightened his bow tie with familiar hands. "But you don't have to stay long if it's too much." Before he could respond, they were approached by an elderly couple, the hospital's biggest donors, Mike would later learn. "Katherine, darling." The woman air-kissed Catherine's cheeks. "And this must be the mechanic we've heard so much about." Mike felt Katherine tense beside him, but Emma spoke up first. "My dad's not just a mechanic. He's the best repair shop owner in Denver. He can fix anything." The woman blinked, clearly unused to being addressed so directly by a child at these functions, but Emma wasn't done. "Did you know he taught Kate how to make pasta from scratch? And he helps me with science. And he coaches soccer sometimes. And he makes the best hot chocolate with exactly 7 marshmallows." Katherine squeezed Emma's shoulder gently, but her eyes shone with pride. The elderly woman's expression softened. "7 marshmallows, you say? That does sound precise. My late husband was an engineer. He always said precision was the mark of excellence in any field." Just like that, the ice was broken. Mike found himself in a surprisingly engaging conversation about the similarities between mechanical engineering and auto repair. Emma charmed everyone she met, her natural enthusiasm cutting through the practiced politeness of high society. Later, during dinner, Mike watched Emma explain her renewable energy project to a table full of tech executives. They were listening with genuine interest, taking notes on their phones. "She's remarkable," Katherine murmured beside him. "Just like her father." "She certainly handled this better than I have," Mike admitted. "I disagree." Katherine nodded toward the elderly couple, now enthusiastically telling others about the fascinating young man they'd met. "You're exactly who you are, Mike. That's rarer than you'd think in this world." The evening wore on. Mike danced with Emma, then with Katherine, gradually relaxing into the unfamiliar environment. He noticed things. How some people's smiles never reached their eyes, how many conversations centered on money and status, how Katherine seemed to wear her CEO persona like armor. During a quiet moment, while Emma was being taught to waltz by a charmed orchestra conductor, Mike pulled Katherine onto a balcony. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not expecting me to be anything other than who I am. For being proud to stand with a mechanic in a borrowed tuxedo." Katherine touched her father's watch on Mike's wrist. "When I'm with you and Emma, I get to be who I really am too. No pretense. No performance." She smiled. "Besides, it's a very good tuxedo." They were interrupted by Emma's excited voice. "Dad! Kate! The conductor says I can lead the orchestra for one song. Come on!" As they followed Emma back inside, Mike realized something. Yes, this world of wealth and privilege was foreign to him, but real connections, like Emma's innocent ability to win over a jaded crowd or his honest conversations that cut through social facades, were rare and valuable in any context. They watched Emma raise the conductor's baton, her face glowing with joy. Behind them, the wealthy crowd cheered genuinely for this child who didn't care about their net worth or social status. "Your daughter," an impressed board member said to Katherine, "is absolutely delightful." "She's Mike's daughter," Katherine corrected gently, her hand finding his. "I'm just lucky enough to be part of their lives." In that moment, wearing his borrowed tuxedo and holding Katherine's hand, Mike felt like the wealthiest man in the room. Sunday dinner had become their tradition. Katherine's driver no longer questioned dropping her off at the modest apartment complex instead of her penthouse. Today, she arrived carrying grocery bags, her designer heels replaced with comfortable flats, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "I found that recipe," she announced, pulling a worn cookbook from her bag. "The one your mom used to make." Mike looked up from where he was helping Emma with her reading homework. "The pot roast? You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Katherine set the bags down and pulled out her mother's old apron. Another piece of her past she'd been bringing into their present. Besides, Emma promised to help. "After I finish this chapter," Emma said, not looking up from her book. "We're at the good part." The kitchen came alive with activity. Katherine had been taking cooking lessons seriously, determined to master the everyday skills that her privileged life had never required. Mike watched her confidently chop vegetables, remembering how just months ago she'd barely known how to boil water. "Your technique's improved," he noted, sliding an arm around her waist. "I had a good teacher." She leaned into him briefly before returning to her task. "Though I still can't make pancakes without burning them." "That's okay," Emma piped up, finally closing her book. "Dad burns them too. He just pretends it's on purpose." They worked together, the familiar dance of family dinner preparation feeling natural now. Emma set the table with the mismatched plates Katherine had come to love more than her expensive china. Mike showed Katherine his mother's trick for perfect gravy, the apartment filled with warmth and savory aromas. As the roast cooked, they sat at the small kitchen table, Katherine adding her own notes to the margins of recipes in the family cookbook. She'd earned that right over the past months, contributing her own discoveries alongside generations of Sullivan family cooking wisdom. "I was thinking," she said carefully, turning a page, "about the future." Mike and Emma both looked up, sensing the weight in her words. "The lease on my penthouse is up next month," she continued, "and I spend most of my time here anyway." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Mike asked quietly. Katherine took a deep breath. "I know this place is small, and I know it's complicated with my position, but—" "Yes!" Emma burst out. "You should live here. You can have the spare room. Dad just uses it for storage anyway." "Emma," Mike cautioned, but he was smiling. "Let Kate finish." Katherine reached for both their hands across the table. "I don't want to disrupt what you have here, this home, this life you've built. It's beautiful, real. I just want to be part of it. Properly part of it." "But what about your fancy apartment?" Emma asked, "and all your things?" "Things are just things, sweetheart. What matters is where you feel at home." Katherine squeezed their hands. "And I feel at home here, with both of you." Mike stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ordinary street below. When he turned back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "You know the media will have a field day. Billionaire CEO moves to two-bedroom apartment." "Let them," Katherine said firmly. "I've spent too long living how others expect me to live. Besides," she smiled, "this place has something my penthouse never did." "What's that?" Emma asked. "Love, family, the smell of slightly burned pancakes on Sunday mornings." Mike pulled her up from her chair, drawing her close. "You're sure about this? Really sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She looked around the small kitchen, at Emma's artwork on the fridge, at the cookbook full of family history. "My father always said home isn't about the size of the house, it's about the size of the love inside it." Emma hugged them both. "Does this mean you'll be here for breakfast every day and help me with homework?" And the timer dinged, interrupting her flood of questions. The pot roast was ready, filling the kitchen with the aroma of home and family and love. As they sat down to dinner, Katherine looked at her little family, the mechanic who had fixed more than just her car, the little girl who had taught her more about joy than any business success ever had, the simple plates, the cramped kitchen, the overflow of love. "Perfect," she said softly, and meant everything. The call came during the most important board meeting of Katherine's career. Hayes Technologies was on the verge of their biggest acquisition yet, a deal that would revolutionize their AI development program. She was mid-presentation when her phone buzzed with Mike's number. She sent it to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately, then a text. "Emma's in the hospital. Please come. Catherine's voice faltered mid-sentence. The board members leaned forward, sensing her distraction. Her. EOO raised an eyebrow questioningly. I apologize, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. There's a family emergency. Charles will continue the presentation. She was out the door before anyone could protest, already dialing Mike as she ran to her car. The hospital was across town. Rush hour traffic stretched between them like an impassable barrier. What happened? She demanded as soon as Mike answered. She collapsed at school. They're saying pneumonia, but they're running tests. His voice was tight with worry. They want to keep her overnight for observation. Katherine pressed harder. On the accelerator, weaving through traffic. I'm coming 20 minutes. The board meeting doesn't matter. Nothing matters except Emma. She found them in the pediatric ward. Emma looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped steadily. Mike sat beside her, still wearing his work clothes, grease stains on his hands from the repairs he'd abandoned. Kate, Emma said weakly, trying to smile. Did you leave your important meeting? Katherine kicked off her heels and climbed onto the bed, careful of the IV lines. You're more important than any meeting. Her phone buzzed again. The board members were demanding answers. The acquisition team needed decisions. Reporters were already speculating about her abrupt departure. She turned the phone off. The night stretched long. Emma's fever spiked, breaking only near dawn. Mike paced. Katherine made calls, not to her office, but to specialists she knew, ensuring Emma had the best care possible. Miss Hayes, a nurse said gently, holding out a stack of forms. About the billing department's questions. Katherine reached, and for her wallet, but Mike stopped her. I've got it covered, he said quietly. Mike, please, let me help. I'm her father. I need to handle this. Katherine recognized the pride in his voice, the need to provide for his child. But she also saw the worry in his eyes as he looked at the mounting bills. What if, she suggested carefully, we handle it together, as a family? Before Mike could respond, Emma's monitors started beeping more rapidly. Her breathing became labored. The next few hours passed in a blur of doctors, tests, and rising panic. Katherine's phone, when she finally turned it back on, exploded with messages. The acquisition was falling apart. The media was having a field day. The board was calling an emergency session. Go, Mike said, seeing her face. I know it's important. No. Katherine took his hand. I meant what I said. Nothing is more important than this, than us. A text from her COO. Board vote in 1 hour. Your presence required. Katherine looked at Emma, finally sleeping peacefully after the latest round of medication. At Mike, exhausted but standing strong. At the life she'd chosen, so different from the one she'd planned. She made her call. Charles, the vote will proceed without me. Yes, I understand what's at stake. No, this isn't negotiable. My family needs me. She turned off her phone again and settled back into the uncomfortable hospital chair. Mike's hand found hers in the dim light. You'll lose the deal, he said softly. There will be other deals. She squeezed his hand. There's only one Emma, only one us. Emma stirred in her sleep, reaching out. They both moved to hold her hands, forming a circle of love and protection around their little girl. Morning found them all asleep in various awkward positions. Emma's fever had broken for good. The monitors beeped steadily. Outside the window, the sun rose over Denver, painting the city gold. Katherine's empire might have taken a hit, but as she watched her family sleep, she knew she'd never been richer. The morning Emma came home from the hospital, Mike found Katherine at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and her laptop. She'd been up since dawn, restructuring not just the failed acquisition, but her entire approach to running Hayes Technologies. The board isn't happy, she said without looking up, sensing his presence. But they're listening. I proposed a new management structure, one that doesn't require the CEO to be available 24/7. Mike set a cup of coffee beside her. You don't have to change everything for us. I'm not. She finally met his eyes. I'm changing it for me, for the kind of leader, the kind of person I want to be. From Emma's room came the sound of coughing. They both moved instinctively, but the coughing subsided. The antibiotics were working. The doctors had assured them. She just needed time and rest. "About the hospital bills," Mike started. "Already handled." Katherine held up a hand as he began to protest. "Not by me, by the new Hayes Technologies Employee Health Fund, available to all employees and their families." She smiled slightly. The board was quite enthusiastic about this particular PR move. Mike sat heavily. "You created an entire company program just to help with our bills without hurting my pride." "No." Katherine pushed a document across the table. "I created it because you made me realize how many families struggle with medical expenses. The fact that it helps us too is convenient." He read through the program details. It was comprehensive, practical, and would help thousands of families, just like the woman who had designed it. "This is why I fell in love with you," he said quietly. Katherine's fingers stilled on her laptop. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. "Because I found a creative solution to our healthcare needs," she tried to joke. "Because you see problems and fix them, not just with money but with understanding." He took her hand. "Because you respect my pride while teaching me it's okay to accept help. Because you love Emma like she's your own." "She feels like my own," Katherine admitted. "You both do. When she was sick, nothing else mattered. Not the company, not the deals, not the board. Just our family." A small voice came from the doorway. "Are you guys being mushy again?" They turned to find Emma in her pajamas, looking pale but determined. Katherine quickly cleared space on the table as Mike went to help her to a chair. "How you feeling, sweetheart?" Katherine asked, touching her forehead automatically to check for fever. "Better." Emma looked at the papers scattered across the table. "Are you in trouble because you stayed with me at the hospital?" "No, honey. I'm making changes so I can always be there when you need me, when either of you need me." Emma picked up one of the documents, squinting at the complex text. "Is it like when Dad reorganized the garage so he could come to my soccer games?" Mike and Katherine exchanged surprised looks. Trust Emma to cut straight to the heart of things. "Exactly like that," Katherine smiled. "Sometimes you have to fix the whole system to make room for what matters most." "Good." Emma nodded decisively. "Because I like having both of you around, even if you are mushy sometimes." Mike pulled Emma onto his lap, and Katherine moved her chair closer, completing their circle. Outside, rain began to fall, making the apartment feel even cozier. "I've been thinking," Mike said, "about acceptance, about family, about how sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people help you." Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder. "And I've been thinking about balance, about how success means nothing if you're not there for the people you love." "I've been thinking too," Emma announced, "about how when you love people, you make room for them, like Dad did with the garage, and Kate did with her company." She looked between them, "and like you both did with your hearts." Out of the mouths of babes, Katherine thought, blinking back tears. She had walked away from the biggest deal of her career without hesitation, yet that choice had led to something even bigger, a revolution in how her company approached work-life balance, starting at the top. Mike pulled them both closer, his family whole and healing. The hospital bills lay forgotten on the table, just another obstacle they'd overcome together. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside their small apartment, they had everything they needed. Sometimes the biggest fixes required nothing more than open hearts and willing hands. Spring came to Denver in bursts of color and possibility. On a bright Saturday morning, Katherine stood in front of a modest two-story house, holding 3 sets of keys. The front yard wasn't large, but there was space for a garden. The garage was twice the size of Mike's old one. Most importantly, it was exactly halfway between Sullivan's Auto Repair and Hayes Technologies. "Well?" she asked, watching Mike and Emma explore the front porch. "It's perfect," Emma declared, already eyeing the tree that would be perfect for a swing. "Can I pick my room?" Mike nodded and she darted inside. They could hear her footsteps above as she explored the upstairs bedrooms. "What do you think?" Katherine asked Mike softly. "And before you worry about the cost, remember our deal." Yako deal had been their compromise. They would buy a house together, something within Mike's means to contribute to significantly, but in a good school district with space for all of them to grow. Not Catherine's penthouse, not Mike's apartment, but something new that belonged to all of them. Mike ran his hand along the porch railing. It needs some work. The railing's loose, the garage door probably needs realignment, and I bet the water heater's old. Is that a yes? Katherine smiled, recognizing his mechanic's assessment as acceptance. He pulled her close. It's a yes. A home we can fix up. Together. Emma's voice carried from inside. Can we paint my room purple? And can I have a desk for my computer? Kate promised to teach me coding. They found her in what would become her bedroom, already planning where everything would go. The room had a window seat perfect for reading, and enough space for both her books and the computer equipment Katherine had promised for her coding lessons. Look what I found! Emma held up a small brass key she'd discovered on the window seat. Do you think it's magical? Every key is magical, Katherine said, holding up their new house keys. They open doors to new beginnings. Mike watched his two favorite people dream up plans for their new home. The house wasn't massive by Katherine's usual standards, but it was bigger than anywhere he'd lived before. More importantly, it was theirs, a physical representation of how they'd bridged their two worlds. Later, as Emma continued exploring, Mike and Katherine stood in what would be their home office. She'd insisted on including a workspace where she could handle Hayes Technologies' business from home, complete with a small corner for Mike to manage the garage's paperwork. I have something for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. Consider it a housewarming gift. Inside was a deed to Sullivan's auto repair. The building, not just the business. Mike stared at it in shock. You bought my garage? No, Katherine smiled. Hayes Technologies is launching a new technical training program teaching basic computer repair alongside auto mechanics. We needed a partner garage for the practical training aspects. The board agreed that purchasing the property and maintaining its current management was the most sensible approach. Mike understood what she'd done. She'd found a way to secure his business's future while respecting his independence, wrapping it all in a neat corporate bow that even her board couldn't argue with. You're incredible, he said, pulling her close. Absolutely incredible. I learned from the best, she murmured against his chest. A certain mechanic taught me that fixing things isn't just about the right tools. It's about understanding what needs to be preserved while you make improvements. Emma's voice interrupted them. Dad, Kate, come see. There's a perfect spot in the backyard for a vegetable garden. They joined her outside, where the afternoon sun painted everything in possibilities. The yard wasn't huge, but Emma was right. There was space for a garden. Space for summer barbecues and weekend projects. Space for a family to grow. Can we get started today? Emma asked. Moving in and fixing things? Katherine checked her phone. No urgent messages from the office. Her new work structure was holding firm, giving her the space to be here in this moment. Why not? She smiled. I think I saw some paint samples in my car. Mike pulled out his father's old toolbox, the one that had started everything. I suppose that railing won't fix itself. Together, they began the work of turning a house into their home. Emma collected rocks for a garden border. Katherine traded her designer clothes for old jeans and a t-shirt, learning how to sand wood for the porch railing. Mike moved between them, teaching, guiding, building their future one repair at a time. The magical key from the window seat found a special place on Emma's new desk, a reminder that sometimes the best magic isn't in fairy tales. It's in the simple act of three people choosing to build a life together. 1 year later, the gathered crowd at Sullivan's Auto Repair and Tech Training Center made Katherine pause as she pulled up in her Tesla, the same one that had broken down that fateful day. The sign above the garage gleamed with fresh paint, the new addition to the name, reflecting how much had changed in a year. Inside, Emma stood proudly beside a row of computers, teaching a group of wide-eyed kids the basics of coding. At 9 years old, she had become the unofficial mascot of the training program, splitting her time between helping her dad with basic car maintenance and assisting Katherine with the computer classes. "And that's how you write a simple loop," Emma explained, her confidence reminding Katherine so much of herself at that age. Just like how a car engine goes through the same cycle over and over, a loop in code repeats until it gets the job done. Mike appeared beside Katherine, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "She's getting pretty good at combining both worlds, isn't she?" "Just like her parents," Katherine smiled, leaning into him. The training center had become a model for Hayes Technologies' community outreach program. 3 more locations had opened across the city, but this one remained special, not just because it was the first, but because it was home. Their house, just 10 minutes away, had transformed over the past year. The garden Emma had envisioned now flourished, producing vegetables they actually managed not to kill. The loose porch railing had been fixed, though they'd kept one wobbly spindle as a reminder of their first day there. The garage housed both Katherine's Tesla and Mike's restored Mustang, a project they'd completed together, spending weekends, covered in grease and trading stories. "Ready for tonight?" Mike asked, pulling Katherine back to the present. She nodded. Tonight was the 1-year anniversary of not just the training center, but also their wedding. They'd kept it small, Emma as their flower girl, the elderly couple from the gala as honored guests, and a handful of close friends. Katherine had worn her mother's dress, Mike his own suit, not borrowed, and Emma had insisted on wearing her soccer jersey under her fancy dress, just in case. The newspaper headline the next day had read, "Tech CEO marries auto mechanic, a modern fairy tale." But their real story was so much better than any fairy tale. "Mom, Dad," Emma called out. She'd started calling Katherine Mom 6 months ago, naturally and without prompting. "Can you help? Tyler's having trouble understanding the difference between a computer virus and a real one." They shared a smile at her mixing of technical and practical terms before joining her at the teaching station. Mike might not know coding, and Katherine still occasionally burned pancakes, but together they made it work. The pocket watch now, mounted in a special display case on the office wall, kept time as it had for 3 generations. Below it hung the photo from that first soccer game, along with news clippings about the training center's success and Emma's recent win at the state science fair. Later that evening, after the students had gone and Emma was finishing her homework in the office, Katherine found Mike staring at the Tesla that had started it all. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "Just thinking about fate," he said, pulling her close. "About broken-down cars and billionaires and little girls who believe in magic keys." "Speaking of magic," Katherine grinned, "Emma's planning something for our anniversary dinner. I saw cake ingredients hidden in the pantry." "As long as you're not cooking it," he teased. "Hey, I've improved." "You have," he acknowledged softly, and they both knew he meant more than just her cooking. Emma joined them, homework complete. "Ready to go home? I have a surprise." As they locked up the garage, Katherine paused to look at their reflection in the window. A CEO, a mechanic, and the little girl who had helped them both fix what they hadn't known was broken. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real family built with love, understanding, and maybe just a touch of magic. The Tesla started perfectly, as it had every day since that first repair. But they took the long way home, enjoying the journey just as they had from the very beginning.